Welcome to Learn Medical Spanish. Today we're going to go over a gastrointestinal review of systems in Spanish. So quick reminder, I recently created 5 very focused beginner lessons about medical Spanish, some of the very first things that you'd want to learn, and you can find those at learnmedicalspanish.org/lessons. If you're on YouTube, you can see that link. If not, I'll put it below in the episode description. And this is really high yield stuff, especially for providers or clinicians. In other words, doctors, PAs, NPs, some of the very first things you'd want to learn about medical Spanish. So head on over if you want to check those out. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the phrases for today. So as usual, I'll say them in English first, and then I'll pause so you can think about the translation, and I'll say them in Spanish a couple of times. So here's the first one, and it's kind of an introduction to the whole thing. So the phrase is, do you also have or have you had? ¿También tiene o ha tenido? ¿También tiene o ha tenido? And as you can probably tell, this is introducing several phrases that follow. So you're going to ask him, do you also have blank or have you had blank? So you can either say that whole phrase or you can pick part of it, whichever part fits the question that follows. So let's continue. Vomiting. Vómitos. Vómitos. Nausea. 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 Abdominal pain. Dolor en el abdomen. Dolor en el abdomen. And just like English, you can use other words. Like if you want to say stomach instead of abdomen, that'd be estómago. But, that's just one option. Next is flank pain. Dolor en el costado. Dolor en el costado. Diarrhea. Diarrea. Diarrea. Watery, meaning is the diarrhea watery? Como agua. Como agua. With blood. Con sangre. Con sangre. So that phrase, como agua, means like water, if you weren't sure. So it's like watery, so I'm saying like water. Next phrase, blood in your stool. Sangre en sus heces. Sangre en sus heces. So heces sounds kind of like feces, so it's kind of a formal way of saying it, but a less formal way would be popo, like poop. Just FYI in case you want to try something different. Next one is difficulty swallowing. Dificultad para tragar. Dificultad para tragar. Gallbladder inflammation. Inflamación de la vesícula. Inflamación de la vesícula. And it's not listed here, but I probably should have added this at some point. So let's add it. How about gallstones? Piedras en la vesícula. Piedras en la vesícula. So just that word piedras, which means stones, and you can use that for gallstones, kidney stones, and then reference the organ. Next, liver inflammation. Inflamación del hígado. Inflamación del hígado. And in case it wasn't clear, the reason we're using a phrase like inflammation of the liver instead of saying like hepatitis is because we're trying to use layman's terminology that people are more likely to understand. Next is pancreas inflammation. Inflamación del páncreas. Inflamación del páncreas. Intestinal infection. Infección en el intestino. Infección en el intestino. Intestinal obstruction. Bloqueo en el intestino. Bloqueo en el intestino. A hernia. Una hernia. Una hernia. So that's a perfect example of a word that is spelled the same in English and Spanish, but you just pronounce it differently because the letters are a little different. So if you're still working on the pronunciation part, then you can go back a few episodes and find the episode where I explain everything about pronunciation in Spanish. I'm referring to the podcast episode. If you're on YouTube, I've got a video about that, which you can find on my channel. The next phrase is, have you had abdominal surgery? ¿Ha tenido cirugía en el abdomen? ¿Ha tenido cirugía en el abdomen? Point to where. Señale dónde. Señale dónde. So another good way to ask about surgery is to say something like, le han operado, as in, have they operated on you? And then you could say, reference a body part or whatever. Might be a little more common than this phrase that I used here of ha tenido cirugía, have you had surgery? But I think they would understand either way. Okay, so that's the end of that ROS, and quick reminder, I've got these focused beginner lessons you can get at learnmedicalspanish.org/lessons. Super high yield for providers. And if you're on YouTube, here's a playlist with a bunch of additional dialogues for emergency medicine providers and a video about my CME course. Thanks for watching or listening, and I'll see you next time on Learn Medical Spanish.